Welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chesnut.
And I'm Uranio.
And today we are talking a little bit more deeply about the wings and arrow line movements as pathways for transformation.
Yeah, we get feedback that this is a theme people want to hear more about, and we love talking about that. And this won't be the last episode we'll do on that at all. There is even, I think, new theory coming up, maybe. So, but not today. Today we want to clarify a few important things.
Right.
But before we go on, happy to have you here in London, in my office,
here.
in my house, and we are doing retreats here. We did an experiential retreat with a great group of people, and we start tomorrow the alchemical retreat, or most advanced retreat of our personal mastery program. So we are happy with that.
Yes, looking forward to that.
Yeah, and also Iceland pretty soon, talking about shadows.
Right.
So exciting moment of the year by the end of 2023. Maybe you are listening to this later on, but we always like to say when we are recording this.
I'm also going to Germany next weekend and doing a subtypes training there for a group, and I'm really excited about that because I've never done any teaching in Germany, although I love Germany. My brother lives there and his wife and their kids, and so I really enjoy going to Germany. So, but this will be great to teach a course.
I admire you for the fact that you understand a little bit of German.
Not very much.
And you even say some words with good pronunciation.
Yeah, and I say some words with horrible. You should see the looks on the Germans' faces when I try to say certain words.
Well, they certainly get happy
horrified.
That you're trying, although they're known to be a little picky if the pronunciation is not ready, not the best.
Yeah.
So and what is funny for me is that when you try to speak Portuguese, which you also understand a little bit, you have a little bit of vocabulary already, pouquinho. When you do that, sometimes you have a German accent.
That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. And it's not fair because I don't speak German or Portuguese.
Well, I think it goes to a particular part of your brain where languages are stored.
I mean, I will say that when I try to think of the Portuguese word, I think of the German word very often, even though, again, I'm not fluent in German at all. And I don't know very many words.
And when I try to learn Italian or brush up my French, I really can't, because I use Spanish more. So the words in Spanish come to me, and my native language in Brazil is Portuguese.
And of course, trying to learn Portuguese has ruined my Spanish, what little Spanish I had, which wasn't much in the first place.
Do you think it's the aging for both of us, or is it just how it is?
Maybe. Let's not talk about age.
Maybe the arrows or wings can help us with that. Let's see.
Maybe so, yeah. And the arrows and wings are really an important topic, very central to the Enneagram, because, as Gurdjieff said, the Enneagram symbol needs to be seen as being in motion. That a static symbol is a dead symbol. And he was very clear that we need these to be seeing it almost as always either going up or going down. We sometimes say the Enneagram symbol should be seen in 3 dimensions. And so we not only should it be seen in 3 dimensions, but we should be seeing it sort of in movement. And so what we'll talk about today is a little bit more depth into talking about 2 pathways of growth. One is the wings path, and one is the arrow line path, because these are 2 different but very, very important ways that we can see or model the path of transformation that we each can take using the Enneagram.
Right. There is the Enneagram of personality, and there is the process Enneagram. And the process Enneagram being about all the motion on the symbol and bringing us understanding of any process in life, not only our human transformation. So if we understand the process Enneagram a bit more, which is something very important if you go deeper in the study of this system, then we can use those things related to the movement along the lines of the Enneagram as something very useful in the study of personality types. So when we combine both, we are getting way more from all that the system can offer.
Right, right,
Yeah. And sometimes you say, and I like that the Enneagram always comes in threes.
right.
Would you mind explaining that again?
Yeah, the Enneagram always comes in threes. There are three centers of intelligence. There are three types that overuse each center. There are three subtypes for each type. And the arrows and wings pathways are also representative of another kind of three. So, for instance, I'm a two, I'm a type two. Part of my path of growth, one way I can grow and stretch and get out of the fixated view of my main type of type 2 is a kind of what we might call the wings path of development. That means I can learn, I can stretch into uh, doing things a little bit more like a one would do it, or seeing through the perspective of one, or doing things that healthy ones do more easily or more readily than I might, as a way of, with some intention, sort of moving out or stretching out of always seeing things through one lens, and that's the lens of my main type. Similarly, after I integrate some of the healthy qualities of one, I can also integrate the other wing point of two, which is three, and I can take on some healthy qualities of three. Like, for instance, for me, I can sometimes get moody. And when I'm in a mood, it makes it hard to get things done, or it makes it hard to take on some of the practical tasks of life. But threes are really good at pushing moods out of the way, and doing what they need to do in life. And if I can, with some intention, stretch into three, then that is a kind of more gentle, gradual, early stage of development move that I can start to make to lean in another direction as a way of not just being a two, right? So if I'm bringing in one and three in intentional ways and seeing how those add to my repertoire of strategies for being in life and doing and thinking and feeling, then that's a kind of three. It's a kind of triad of three types that are now informing what I'm doing, so that I'm not just stuck in two. And so we believe that what we're calling this the wings pathway is something that people can really benefit from. And by the way, just as a side note, what we're talking about here, this sort of three, your type and your two wings as a growth pathway, is one of the reasons why we don't adhere to a lot of people, when they talk about the Enneagram, they define their type in terms of one wing or the other. Like they'll say, I'm a two with one wing, right? But the problem with that, and this is something that we try to communicate in different ways, is that what I hear when that person says that is they need to work. If you're a two with a one wing, you need to work on integrating more three to balance yourself out, because a bird with one wing flies in circles, and we need both wings because again, it's the law of three, is the idea that it takes three forces to bring anything new into creation. So if I'm bringing in a lot of one, I'm by definition going out of balance. And knowing with the Enneagram map, I can recognize bringing in more three with a lot of intention, doing things that healthy threes do, is a way of creating more balance in my life by bringing in what we might call this wings pathway, bringing in both of the wings to create a more positive transformation.
Yeah, so I think it would be fair to say that there is no sustainable, complete transformation in a process of transforming that is well wrapped up without going to the 2 points, either the two wings or the two arrows. So transformation needs the three energies. And that also brings us to another important point of understanding. Many times we develop access to one of those points and not to the second one. Like for you as a two, it could be like I go to one, but I don't go to three. For me as a five, it could be I go to four and I don't go to six, or vice versa. And that is a problem. And
Right.
the way we describe that is we are overusing one of the wings or one of the arrow points and underusing the other one. And that's a problem. And we need to work on both things, because when we overuse one, chances are that we fall into traps of that point we are overusing and start using it in not so good ways.
Right.
And if we underuse the other one, we're missing out, and we are not developing other important points in balancing our transformation, and we are resisting things that are important for us to transform.
Right. Like sometimes you've given me feedback. I'm a 2, and you know, I usually don't say I have a 1 wing, because I can see both, and I don't see it as sort of one is always dominant permanently. But I know that, you know, I grew up in a family of 4, as I've said before, with 50% of the people, the 4 people in the family were 1s. So I can be very 1ish. And I sometimes get criticized. I'm sorry. Sometimes get good feedback from you that I can be really critical at times. And I've learned to watch that in myself based on your good feedback, and to notice that sometimes I want to say something, and instead of saying it, I kind of hold on to it for a minute, and I look at it and I think, ooh, that's kind of critical. That would reasonably be heard as critical, and I don't need to say it that way, and I don't need to even be, you know, this is an excessively critical perspective, and to be able to see that is important. Now, hopefully, I'm not going to be permanently, you know, overly critical as a 2, with like a 1 wing, because, and part of what can help me in that, I believe, is focusing a little more on 3 and bringing out the 3 in me to create more balance.
Right. And just for you listening to us, if you come to a workshop or retreat with us at CP, you must expect B to be very loving and not critical of you. She's actually critical, just people of her family and me, like I'm sister and brother, you know, then she
Well,
becomes more critical.
or
But
business partner who's
yeah,
doing certain things.
yes, yes. But with the students, she's not like that. So
No.
you will be very welcome, and you can
Yeah.
expect B to be the loving presence there for you. Now, not that I'm not, but she's especially that. So, okay, so there is something else I want to say.
Okay.
In the past, we used to say that the positive use of the wings and the positive use of the arrows, we called that conscious movement to the 2 points. And the negative movement to those 2 points of growth, we used to call unconscious movement. And we are changing terminology right now and announcing this, I guess, at this podcast.
Because we're always working on trying to articulate Enneagram theory in better ways, that as we sort of work on unveiling a little bit more, chipping away at the truth embedded in this amazing symbol.
Yeah, because in practice, it's tricky to say conscious, because one of the meanings of conscious is going up. But the other meaning
You
of
mean
conscious,
when you say going up, what do you mean?
Is going up on levels, getting more
becoming
evolved,
more conscious,
more conscious,
getting to a higher state of consciousness.
Right. Yeah. So that's one of the meanings. But there is another one, which is I am always conscious of going to those 2 points. Like I know it's happening. It's not unconscious for me, but not in the sense of being good or bad, more in the sense of following what's happening, of knowing and observing what's happening.
Right.
And the reality is that the positive movement to either the 2 arrows or the 2 wings can be something that we receive from life as a consequence of good work and being ready, but we receive, while that in other times it's something that we try to do and we evoke intentionally. Right. So basically, we're suggesting a new terminology from today, which is evolution or devolution.
Yeah.
Devolution.
Devolution. Yeah. I'm not sure how to say that. Evolution or devolution.
Yes.
Devolution. Devolution sounds
Devolution.
better. But basically, the opposite of evolution.
Yeah, it's going up or going
Going
down
down
on the levels of
in
awareness.
being conscious. Yeah.
In
Less
being,
conscious or more conscious.
yeah, but let's not use the
Oh,
conscious word.
sorry.
Yeah, so it's more like being more evolved or less evolved,
Right.
evolving or devolving.
Right. And I
So,
guess we also want to say, and we're clarifying, and correct me if I don't
yes,
have this right, that when we're evolving, so using the arrows or the two, so either using the two wings or the two arrow line connected points, in order to help us evolve or become more aware and better, I guess. I try
yes,
not to use the word
yes,
conscious, although it's
yes.
hard not to.
Uh-huh.
That happens in two different ways. One is by intentionally evoking, like if I am, I just keep using my example
Yeah,
myself,
yeah, yeah,
so we
good.
have an example. I don't want to seem self-centered.
Yeah, it's good.
But if I'm a two, I can with a lot of intention say I'm trying to be a little more eight-ish. I'm trying to be, now I've spent a lot of time at four in my life, so I am trying to focus more on eight
You're
because
doing well with that.
I'm constantly going to four. So I'm in with intention. I'm trying to be more direct. I'm trying to be a little more tough, more thick-skinned. I'm trying to be more assertive in a positive way. I'm trying to, engage in constructive conflict in a way that doesn't make me feel hopeless. All of these things that can be me evoking that movement with intention. But another thing that you've pointed out, another way that we can move in a positive way to one of our arrow
Evolve,
points,
evolve.
evolve, or to one using our wing points is through receiving what life brings. And I like that because sometimes what happens is like we'll get an opportunity. Like for instance, sometimes when we're working with someone at a retreat, it'll be a person who's they've been given a promotion or they're giving an opportunity in their professional life that they're sort of not really sure what to do with. It's sort of scary because they don't really feel like they're ready, but life is bringing that, right? And when they talk about what they're doing and where they've been, and they're really ready. Maybe their ego, their personality is just habitually sort of resisting new opportunities or owning their strength. And so life in a way is bringing that person. And so in that instance, it's important for us to be always cultivating a state of receptivity to what life is bringing so that we can move with the inner flow of the Enneagram, um, as a way of not resisting, because I think one way we stay stuck in our personality patterns is by just habitually, without realizing it, like holding on to the way we've always done it. Like for me, there's a like habitual way I can always react in a certain way. And if I can see myself doing that and relax that resistance and just be open and receptive, sometimes the opportunities that life is bringing us help us go to these different points when they're just showing up. There may be a really obvious thing that's happening for you in your life that you can see as representative of one of your wing points or your arrow line connected points. And if you can see it that way and just allow it, it's more of an allowing and a receiving. Then I think that's another way we can evolve, we can grow, using the wisdom of the movement of the symbol, which is on the one hand around the circle, which is the wing path, or in the inner flow, these inner lines of the diagram, where each type has these particular 2 points that are very, very specific antidotes or balancing points that we can use to grow.
Exactly. And let me intentionally use my arrow to seven now in trying to summarize this in a simple way. Like
Now,
sevens are the point, the Enneagram point that summarize the best
can I
in my
say
view.
something little before you do that?
Yeah.
We do teach that I do think is very important is that we need to do the work in a particular order. So with the wings path, we
Yeah.
believe we need to integrate first the arrow, the wing below. So as a 5, that means you would integrate 4 first, work on that, and then work on integrating the arrow, the wing to 6, right? And so that's an important order. And the more you've worked on 4, the more you can see what's coming from 4 and 6, and not go to 6 before you've integrated 4, which makes it harder to sustain any change or shift that you create at 6. Same with the arrow line points. 5 is connected to 8 and 7. And 8 is the one that 5s need to work on first, because it's what we call the arrow against. So the arrow is pointing from 8 to 5, and then there is an arrow pointing from 5 to 7. It's there are many different ways these arrow line points can manifest. Sometimes it's when you go to 8 as a 5, you go back in time and access something from childhood. Sometimes a 5 can go to 7 to go into the future and develop something new. So I just want to mention that, because if you're using this example that I really want to hear about, 5 going to 7, there's an underlying assumption we might have that as a 5, to really take advantage of what comes from 7, it will be important for you to have done some intentional work on integrating 8, so that any shifts that come from that arrow movement to 7 as a 5 are more sustainable, or it's easier to integrate those things in a way that creates a lasting evolution.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure another very important point to be understood when using the arrows and the wings. But the summary of that previous conversation is that using the wings as paths for growth and using the arrows as paths for growth can be serving evolution, or devolution. And we need to be aware of if we are going up or down in our progress, or coming back to lower levels when using the arrows and the wings. Now, when it's evolution, there are two things that might be happening. One is we are evoking those 2 points and forcing the evolution, as in we are being active in making evolution happen. Intentional would be another word. Or we can be just receptive and receive what life is bringing us that is good for our evolution, and we are not trying to evoke anything, we are receiving. So basically active or receptive in using the good things about the wings and the arrows. Now let's move on, and let's talk also about life moments. Sometimes we are going through a particular change. Sometimes we are doing in a work and we feel shaken. Other times, something very difficult happens in our lives, or a big opportunity, beautiful thing happens. So life moments bring us those movements to either the arrows or the wings. We need to understand that we are not running the show completely, that we are not just making evolution happen, that many times life brings us the right opportunities. As in one of the holy ideas for point 7 on the Enneagram, like life's plan, the holy plan, is always the very best thing that can happen to us. What's happening now is the very best thing when it comes to our evolution. If we follow that, it will be all very, very good. And so receiving again. And we need to see what our life moment is, and where life is bringing us. What is the flow, right? That is very, very important when working with the arrows and the wings. So there is the evoking, the intentional thing, more active movement. And then the receptive movement means going with the flow of what life is already offering us as evolution opportunities. And one last thing I want to say, B, is that sometimes people think that something they're doing is a positive thing in that arrow point, but it's not very positive. And vice versa. They think that there is something negative happening with them, but it's actually positive. So I'll give 2 examples. Me as a 5, I think I use very positively the movement to 8 when I when I connect back to someone in a hard conversation, and then I am trying to really build a bridge and reconnect. But I can also use 8 and assertiveness and say it's very good that I'm assertive while I'm pushing the person away, right? So I need to discern between the two things. Or, for instance, a 9 going to 6 start saying no, going against, and being more of a contrarian, and people cease to be happy with them, and that is very good for them. But chances are that the 9 person says I'm getting worse, because it's not pleasant, people are giving me hard feedback. But that's exactly what needs to happen. So we need to understand that evolution will not always make us be more popular, or
Right.
not always make us feel good. It will be challenging,
Right.
and vice versa for the devolution.
Right, right. It can be hard, especially towards the beginning of the path, because the way we might see what is actually a positive evolution is in some ways evaluated from the point of view of the personality, right? So a 9 who's actually getting more assertive, more in touch with anger, even if it's not really elegantly expressed yet, they're getting in touch with it,
Yeah.
right? And so that needs to be seen and defined as a positive, even if it feels really uncomfortable, or if other people might react to it negatively.
Right. So our intention now is to talk about each type and say one or two things for each. But is there anything else you want to say before that?
Yeah, there's just a couple of things I want to say, or maybe just one more thing I want to say. And that is that sometimes people who are really interested in Enneagram theory want to know, like, what is the source of this, what we're talking about? And a lot of this comes from what we've been seeing and thinking based on our experience working with individuals and groups. But also we are always, especially, I'm an academic, looking to the most authoritative sources. Now, Claudio Naranjo didn't really have a teaching about the aeroline movements. He said a few things. People took things from what he said and drew certain conclusions, but we really want to emphasize that's not the source of this. For instance, Claudio Naranjo is the source of the subtype teaching that we use, but not the source of this. A lot of this comes from, our reading of Gurdjieff and the way he talked about the process movement of the symbol and the Enneagram as a symbol of transformation. Different studies that Uranio's done in Sufism and in the Fourth Way tradition, which is connected to Gurdjieff. And also, I would say A.H. Almas and Sandra Maitri have, I think, a really beautiful teaching about the aeroline movements. And so I think we also, what we talk about is, I would say, similar to, if not identical with, what they talk about also. So those are sort of more, the connections, the sort of source connections that I would want to name, because I know some people are interested in where does this come from.
Yeah, I want to mention also my first Enneagram teacher in Brazil, Raceli,
Right.
who had way back the right take, in my view, in this point of theory. And I think we learned a lot, and a lot comes from that, from students and from working on ourselves.
Yeah. And again, we're always looking at the evidence of how we see people in their process when we work with them. So I mean that we're very grateful to the people we work with in retreats and workshops, and sometimes in business and individually, because we are always learning about the growth process from people who are actually engaged in it in very deep ways. So I would say some of this comes from that.
Right. In our courses, all kinds of courses, we really do work with people. We don't only teach theory, so we learn a lot.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to talk type by type, and we're going to mention
one more thing.
Okay.
I forgot.
Okay.
One more thing. When we talk about the aeroline movements and the wing movements, what we often get the question, like in webinars and classes, courses, we often get the question, and it's a good question. It makes sense of when we sort of go to, or embody or draw from our wings and our arrow line connected points, what happens to our dominant instinct or our subtype, right? The subtype is our main type combined with the influence of the dominant instinct. In other words, if I'm a 2, if I'm a self-preservation 2, when I go to 4, am I a self-preservation 4? When I go to 8, am I basically drawing on self-preservation 8, a little more than just 8, or a different subtype of 8? These are, and that's a very good question. So we just want to say that for now, we're going to leave that question unanswered because we are working on what we think is really a good answer to this. Sometimes we've said we think it's this, but we're not really sure yet. And we're just sort of really working on getting a deeper understanding of the answer to that question. And so far, what we want to say is we think it's complicated. It's not a simple answer. So for now, we're not going to answer that question. So if you're having that question, it makes sense. It's a good question. But we're not going to go there yet because we're still working on a clear, coherent answer that we think will serve this teaching in a way that makes it deeper and more usable. And we're just not quite there yet. And so we don't want to sort of talk about theory that we haven't really fully articulated.
We promise to say it here when we get it in the right way to communicate it. And I am, of course, extremely excited with this discussion.
Yes.
As a social 5.
Yes, but our test is if he explains his new theory to me and I can't understand it, then maybe other people won't.
And then B translates whatever I say in simpler terms.
I'm in charge of making the social 5 more comprehensible, and sometimes that's just not possible yet, but we're working on it.
Okay, so let's talk type by type, and starting with 8 as always. So here's what we can do, B. Let's start with the wings, then go to the arrows. And we talk about each of the 2 points for wings and arrows, starting with the one before and going to the one after. And I say one thing and you say another thing for each of those points.
Okay, so remember, the order is important, right? It's the wing below and then the wing above, and it's the arrow line movement, talking about the arrow against first and then the arrow toward. Because again, I just want to highlight that we believe that doing it in this order is important. And of course, assessing for yourself which wing are you overusing and which wing are you underusing. And again, the goal isn't to walk around saying like I'm an 8 with a 7 wing or I'm a 6 with a 5 wing.
Right.
The goal is to say I'm an 8 who's overusing 7 and needs to work on 9.
Yeah.
Right. That's the goal that we're talking about here, which is, we've talked before about how we don't think wings are subtypes and sometimes they get talked about that way. But the main point of this conversation is when you say you have a wing, what you're actually saying is you need to do work on to integrate the other wing. It's not a permanent state because remember, the Enneagram is in motion and we're aiming for growth and evolution, not staying statically in one place forever or flying around in circles. It's always, this is the law of 3 we're talking about. You need to bring in that third point, the other wing, in order to really transform. So that's the point with that. And
right. And let me just say one last thing.
one last
I hope
thing.
It's the last.
But we don't promise.
When we want to use these points of progress in an intentional way, like actively going for them, one excellent thing to do is to model how that can be by seeing someone in our lives who is from that type. So I want to mention that because people will ask, so how do I do that? And that's one big way.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so 8. I'll say one thing that 8s can benefit from going to the 7 wing first. To me, it's flexibility. It's a lot about seeing the tones of gray in between black and white. A lot about not believing that you have the right answer, not believing that you are the person who sees the right thing. And going to 7, you get curious and flexible to try to find out other ways. And what would you add in the arrow for 7? To 7 for 8.
So you're not going to do 7 and 9 and then I do 7 and 9?
Okay, I can do that. Yeah. So 9, For eights means listening more, learning to be more patient with other people, considering what's behind and why it's difficult for them, and being interested in collecting different opinions and taking all points into account.
All right. So for me, eights can utilize the wing movement to 7 to be lighter and a little more positive, and look for what's fun in the situation. We sometimes say type 1s can be a bit serious, but I think sometimes eights can be a bit serious when they're really trying to get something done, or they really have a point of view that they think is, the right one, and moving things forward. They can get a little bit serious. And so I'd say lightening up, having fun with people, mixing up fun with assertiveness, seeing what's positive, I think can be good for eights when they draw on 7 in a good way. And then 9, I think what I would say, it's a little bit like yours, only I think it's a little more general, like accessing, like perceiving what's happening in your environment more, like pausing instead of moving ahead or defining things in a particular way that you think is right. Like surveying what's happening around you in the environment. I have a good 9 friend, and she says, I can always sense a disruption in the force, right, around me. If there's some point of tension or something, and if 8s can get good at doing what 9s do and say, how is everything happening harmoniously already, that I can flow with, instead of needing to direct that flow in a way that might not be in harmony with what's happening around you.
Mm. Good. So arrows. Eight going to 2, the arrow against, which is the first movement we preconize, um, is emotions. Like getting in touch with emotions and not just doing, and staying in touch with emotions without needing to do something about them. And then on 5, I'd say counting to 3 before doing, planning, analyzing, being a bit more in your head, and then go to the gut.
So for me, I'd say 8s can utilize 2 to really connect with people in a deeper way, especially through empathy. Sometimes I think people who aren't heart types, they think they're empathizing when they might not be.
Yeah.
So really slowing down and really listening to how someone else is feeling, really listening to what they're saying, with the intention of truly connecting, more from the heart, without judging, really opening up and being receptive to how does that person feel, and how does listening to how they feel and expressing how you feel help create more of a connection that's really, really based in sharing feelings and appreciating what's positive in each other. In terms of 5, I would say it's a little bit like what you said. I would say slowing down to think things through. We sometimes say that if the saying is "ready, aim, fire," that sometimes 8s go fire, ready, aim, or something like that. So really slowing things down to survey the situation, to think things through more deeply, to take in more information and more kinds of information. 5s are so good at really looking for information, enjoying the process of taking in information, and I think 8s can benefit from that.
So moving on to 9, the 2 wings. First, the 8 wing for 9s. To me, has to do with not listening and listening and listening and listening and just taking everybody's opinions, but coming up with your own opinion first and saying what you want to happen. And what you see is the truth, because reality is that many times 9s do have opinions and they don't voice them. And then on 1, I think that 9s can be a little bit more rigid in a good way with people. Like if someone doesn't do their job, the 9s at times just go do the person's job themselves because they are avoiding conflict, and 1s don't do that. 1s first, are very firm, saying you promised this deadline is gone or whatever. So that's how I see two good things on the wings for nines.
I think on the wings for me, for nines, eights, drawing on eight to tolerate conflict more. I mean, if you think about how do eights view conflict, I mean, of course, not all eights like conflict. I think that can be a stereotype, but a lot of eights just think sometimes it's just necessary, and it's not that big a deal. If you just engage in it, it moves things forward, right? So taking on the eight view of conflict a little bit more. And I think with ones, it's um, envisioning a positive outcome that matters to you and then taking concrete steps to get
Mm,
there, but drawing on what matters to you to envision that outcome, not just going with what other people want or what other people say is the goal, but what matters to you in terms of the perfect outcome or the ideal that you would like to then take steps to manifest.
beautiful. And then the arrows, right?
Right.
Nines going to three, I think they learn how to put themselves first and even show off in a good way. It's hard for nines to see how can showing off be a good thing, but for them it would be really good, given that they have been spending the whole life, being more invisible and not taking compliments and being second or third. So that is what I think they get on three, is one of the things. And then going to six, they learn to put limits to people and saying no and going against as a little bit more like contrarians and not only people who are agreeable.
Mhm. Um, Now some of mine I feel like are just shade like
Yeah, yeah,
similar to yours, but I think
yeah,
there are
good.
some key points. So
Hmm.
the words I would use for nines utilizing three is just healthy self promotion, and another way I would say it is owning it.
Yeah.
Like own your strengths and don't be afraid to voice your opinion and take credit for your ideas.
Mm.
Sometimes I think nines don't they don't speak up, and then someone else voices the opinion
Mhm.
that they had in the first place that maybe they didn't articulate as well as the nine could.
Sometimes it's like seeing your differentials that make you stand above.
Yeah, and bringing those to the world, and instead of just habitually kind of thinking of yourself as less important or just not taking that active step. Threes are good at taking an active step to say, here's what I think we should do, or here's what I do well that I'm going to feel confident about and just go do. In terms of six, nines draw on six in a good way by accessing some healthy fear. I think sometimes nines say they have fear and anxiety inside, but it remains a little bit vague and they don't articulate it in terms of, okay, what am I afraid of? And how can I just see that more clearly? And sometimes when the time is right, recognize what I need to do in light of it.
Let's go to one. So the nine arrow for a one person brings the capacity of tolerance, being a little less critical with the other person, and being more open to what comes from the other. And then on two, ones get perhaps a little less angry in the inside and a bit more receptive to other people, and they also open up other sorts of emotion that are not just anger.
Mhm. I think ones can draw on the nine wing point to be more easygoing, more rolling with the flow. And so that can really help them a lot. Just, you know, go with other people's flow instead of needing to direct the flow in a way you think is right.
Mhm.
They can draw on the two wing, I think, by really having fun with people, really enjoying being with other people in a more intentional way. They can use the pleasure of relationships to help them relax more and be light and enjoy.
Beautiful. So arrows for type 1 people. Going to seven first, ones can have fun, can have a leisure, can prioritize that, and sometimes do this before duty. And then going to four, it's more like not only doing the operations, the everyday thing, and doing what's next, but thinking bigger and envisioning things, like bringing in a bigger vision and talking about their purpose in life.
Yeah, I think ones draw on seven to let go of shoulds and musts and lighten up on themselves, especially not be so self-critical. Critical, recognize there could be many right ways of doing things, and that can be it can be a fun, creative process to consider all the different opportunities and possibilities. I think sevens draw on four in a healthy way to accept more their deeper emotions and see it as something really positive to get in touch with their emotions and express those emotions and be with emotions rather than just needing to do something about them or repress them because somehow there's something wrong with that.
Right. So for choose, I think that both the one wing and the three wing talk about an opportunity of going for tasks and not only relationships, and being more practical in doing and going for things without just revolving around emotions. But I think that the one wing is more about the process. It's more about, going to details that are important, while the three wing is a bit more going for results, no matter what the emotional process is. What do you think as a Jew?
I think the one wing can help with evaluating what's going on with some objectivity, but not with harshness or too much emotion. Like, oh, we need to course correct here because this could be better. I think sometimes twos can take that personally or feel bad if they made a mistake. And I think being able to just do a critical evaluation of what needs to change or how we can implement something without making it overly problematic to have that evaluation and being objective, I think is something ones do, even though they're not head types.
Good.
In terms of two going to three, I think it's about being able to at will more regularly let go of feeling and get more into doing to accomplish that task without getting too bogged down in the emotions, just doing it instead of creating obstacles that come more from an emotional place or more from a place of um, being hard on yourself.
Right. And then the arrows. When choose go to four, they get in touch with their own agenda, their own needs. They come inside and they don't stay only with other people. And then going to eight, B mentioned that for herself. It's more like putting boundaries, saying what they need and want. So on four, they get in touch with what they need. On eight, they affirm what they need in front of other people.
Right. And I think for twos, going to four, sometimes it's greater acceptance of emotions. Twos can be emotional, but they can judge it. They can repress it. They can think, oh, I'm having this feeling, but it's not okay, or it won't be okay. It'll distance me from somebody else. I think if we can go inside and get more accepting and validate our own emotions, then we can express them with more confidence in the ways that healthy fours do. I think two's going to eight. It's a lot about owning your power as well, and getting more comfortable with balancing, my way and saying what I think instead of needing to make sure that's okay with everybody else. Right. So needing approval a little bit less, needing other people's validation a little bit less at eight.
So three, when threes go to two as the first wing, in my view, they develop a more focus on the relationship itself and not just the goal. The relationship might even become an end at times and not a means. And then on four, threes talk about their hard feelings and they disclose more, and talking not only about their achievements, they get in touch with harder emotions that they may be facing, and they become more approachable when they do that.
Yeah, I think threes can draw on the wing point of two to slow their roll a little bit and listen to others more. Sometimes they disconnect from people when they're on the pathway to their goal. It's like laser focus on the goal and the tasks to get there, and they forget to bring other people along with them or to enjoy the ride, especially if they're working with others. But they also, I think, threes sometimes underappreciate their own abilities to connect with people. So owning a little bit more how people like you or how people appreciate what you're doing and want to connect with you. And so opening up to expressing yourself from the heart a little bit more and creating a little more of that connection along the way instead of mainly going for the task or work focus. Okay, so then threes can use four, I think, to value depth of emotion. I think threes sometimes have this idea, as my friend Val says, that emotions are not aerodynamic, that emotions aren't productive, that emotions slow you down, and so like having a value that emotions are important. They bring important information. They get you in touch with the depth of who you are, with your truer self, and not just the image that you may be trying to create. So getting in touch with four in that way of like accessing your inner truth, and recognizing that true success, a greater success than you maybe usually go for, comes from being more in touch with your heart.
Mm. So arrows, when threes go to six, they look at risks, and that is important for a three who tends to be only positive and then doesn't want to look at risks because it will slow them down. And then on nine, they develop patience, a capacity to relax and wait and see what is happening already and be more in the flow.
Right. And I think three utilizing six in a healthy way can mean, again, like getting in touch with healthy fear. Instead of just charging ahead, slowing down and saying, okay, what are the potential problems we could run into? Sometimes threes don't want to look at the potential problems ahead of time. They don't want to really question what's happening more deeply. They feel like that will slow them down too much. So it can be a good thing to allow for healthy fear, healthy diving deeper into questioning what might be happening. And then in terms of threes going to nine, I think it's recognizing that slowing down, creating a slower pace, finding ways to relax and moderate your pace can be really good. And that some of that energy can come from nine.
Right. So moving on to four. Fours going to the three wing can benefit from just going ahead regardless of their emotions, not giving way and space just for emotions and go to do stuff. And then on five, they can become a bit more rational, more like objective, logical, and not only give way to the oscillation of emotions that they sometimes experience.
Type 4 can use their wing point of 3 to become um, a little bit less focused on their internal world, on emotions, and a little bit more on how they need to shift their expression or their communication in order to get along more or coordinate more with others. Fours can then use the 5 wing um, to be more objective, to take in more objective information to counter what their feelings might be telling them or their over focus at times on feelings.
Right. So the arrows for four, going to one means getting disciplined and being more like one step after the other, a bit more process oriented, which is not that difficult for fours, but not in details. Sometimes do what's good enough and not what's special, and then and not good enough in terms of not excellent, doing the excellent but by the book. Sometimes you don't need to create or innovate. And then on two, they go inside out. Fours might live in the inner world, and on two, they see reality and people for what it is or who they are.
So fours can utilize their arrow movement to one to get more grounded, more in touch with the body, more in touch with creating routines that support them in more practical ways. Then, when they go to two, fours can balance giving and receiving. They can balance that focus on the outside with the natural focus on the inside. They can be of service more and connect more to others in ways that really bridge the gap instead of the way the four can bring something inside them.
Right. So five going to the four wing, get creativity. They become a bit more like inventors and not just researchers. They start creating things out of the box and get more passionate about all of that. And then going to six, they get a little bit of positive anxiety. They don't stay too calm in front of a crisis, or just aloof, or just not engaging with someone when the person is distressed. So I think this is positive for fives. It's not positive for a six to talk about anxiety, but maybe a bit more anxiety for a five can be good.
So I think fives, they can draw on positive aspects of four by learning to have a more intentional process around learning to have their feelings more. It can feel threatening for a five to, learn to be more with their feelings. So having a more space and more acceptance of the process of getting more in touch with emotions, of learning to be with them more, learning to be with them more in relationships, which can be challenging. So it's like almost conceptualizing emotions as something very positive and allowing themselves the space and time they need, but having a real movement forward into understanding and being with their emotions. And of course, that helps them be more with the emotions of other people too.
I agree with that as a five myself.
Thank you. And then fives can you draw on six as a wing point when they can be a little more active in expressing some of their doubts, some of their questions. Sometimes fives stay inside themselves and toss things around a lot inside before sharing anything with other people. And I think sixes can be a little more proactive around asking questions or raising doubts or bringing up things that they think need to be attended to as problems or issues. And I think sometimes fives stay a little bit too much with that inside, and people around them don't really know what's happening and they don't really realize that they haven't communicated because it's habitual not to. So I think they can draw on six by being a little bit more of a shit disturber, if you will, a little bit more disrupting things as a way of drawing attention to things in a way that fives can sort of sometimes err on the side of staying quiet.
Right. And I think the eight arrow is also about not staying quiet and saying what you don't agree with in right away, because otherwise, as a five, I can tell that we just stay with our disagreement in the inside, and we become arrogant, like thinking, oh, it's not even worth explaining. So that's one thing on the arrow to eight. And then the arrow to seven is a lot about saying things before you are sure about, and being more spontaneous, out there, and fun.
Right. So I think fives can usefully draw on the arrow to eight by being a little more concrete, engaging in the world in more pragmatic, practical ways, like showing up not only physically, but with all of them, and engaging a little bit more openly with people. And sometimes that can be driven a little bit by some anger or assertiveness or willingness to confront. And I think in fives, those can be really positive things mixed with their naturally intellectual, thoughtful nature. Being a little bit more pragmatic, a little bit more concrete, a little bit more oriented to doing what's necessary, and not holding back can be a good thing, a good use of 8. And then a good use of 7 for 5s, I think, can be drawing more on their sense of humor. Oftentimes, 5s can be very funny. They can have a really interesting, funny perspective on things. But again, they may not always share those. They may not always value that in themselves the way other people do when they risk letting it out more often and in deeper ways.
Good. So 6. Um, when 6s use the 5 wing, they get calmer and less anxious. A little bit the opposite of what I said for 5s with using the 6 wing. And that's really important for 6s, like calming down. And then on the wing, the 7 wing, 6s just see more of the positive. They see the half full glass of water, and they think that the best can happen, not only the worst.
Right, right, right. I think 6s use the 5 arrow in a in a good way when they allow themselves to not react as much. Sometimes 6s can react from fear and react a little bit quickly, coming from that sense of fear in whatever way they might. I think 5s, it's sort of like they have the reaction more on the inside, and they sort of mull it over and process a little bit more. And I think 6s can really benefit from that. Like, okay, I see a sign of danger here, but is it really a sign of danger? And how can I get more information? And how can I see that in a larger space and not necessarily react to it so quickly, especially when we're talking about reaction from fear. And because 5s can kind of hold that in a larger space. 5s need to react a little bit more from fear sometimes. They can sort of hold themselves away from fully feeling their fear. But 6s can feel the fear too much. And so they benefit from sort of holding that a little bit at bay and getting more information and looking outside at the evidence to see what's really happening in the way I think 5s do a little bit better. And then in terms of the 7 wing for 6s, I think it's, of course, being able to see the positive and not the negative. Be able to positively reframe, or it might be a better way of saying it, see the positive as well as the negative and see them both together and not necessarily interpret something as negative, or see that contrarian tendency and lighten that up a little bit. Like, I don't have to go against everything. I can see many possibilities, and I can enjoy the conversation where we play with different ideas, and I don't have to sort of make something bad that isn't yet, or run away from what's bad just because everybody else is saying it's bad.
Good. So arrows for a 6. Going to the arrow against to 9, it's a lot about relaxation. And 6s are very tense, and many times they don't know how much they are tense. And on 9, they relax. It's like the 5 wing is being calm, but the 9 arrow is being relaxed in the body perspective. And then going to 3 is don't plan as much, don't try to overthink things, and just go do before you have certainty.
I think 6s going to 9, it's a little bit a little bit like for 1s, it's going with the flow. It's seeing where things are going, and especially if things are taking you in the direction of something that's positive for you, allowing yourself to enjoy that, allowing yourself to let that happen in a way that isn't always about like being responsible or making something happen, but it's more about just going with the flow of what's happening, allowing other people's agendas to drive the show in a way that you go along with without questioning too much.
Mm.
And then the 6 going to 3, I think it's about being more comfortable being on stage and allowing yourself to see that as something that you can feel good about, where you can enjoy um, being received by people in a positive way, enjoy the applause of the crowd, and not back away from that.
Good point. So 7s. When 7s go to 6, they do something really important for them, which is seeing the half empty glass of water. And there is a saying that says you must always see the half full, but not sevens. Sevens need to start seeing the half empty and get in touch with what's not okay with them. And then going to eight, they stop approaching conflicts in an indirect way. They start going straight to the point of what needs to change, because sevens can be really indirect in approaching conflicts.
Yeah. I would say sevens can excuse me, sevens can utilize six in a good way by owning a little bit more, making more conscious their anti-authoritarian stance. I think sixes are usually pretty clear that they have a sort of complicated relationship with authority. They can go against authority. They can want a good authority, but be suspicious of authority. I think sevens kind of cover over their need to go against the authority by, oh, it's just all fun, we're all friends, let's just take it really light, and not always own the fact that they really don't want to be controlled, that they're really going against anyone that wants to limit their freedom, and sometimes that means being anti-authority. So I think just being more honest with themselves about that, and being more conscious and aware of how they deal with authority, and when they might want to go against it through just charming and disarming, being a little bit more forthright about what they don't like or what they don't want to do, instead of using intellectual charm as the way around the authority.
Mhm.
And then I think in terms of type eight, I think sometimes sevens can get a little bit lost in their envisioning future possibilities and all the different ways we can do things, and they can have trouble actually taking action, like finding the best possibility and taking action on that.
Mhm.
And I think eights are really good at that. And so taking on that eight stance, okay, once we've considered the options and we've brainstormed a bit, then we're going to very consciously pick the right one and have the courage to move forward with that without distracting ourselves or staying in the confusion or the questioning
Mm.
or the imagination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So sevens going to the 0.5 arrow connecting point. So going to five, sevens go inside here instead of being outside there. It's more like turning the attention from all stimulus that is of what's happening, of what I can do and engage with, to being with myself, and finding this place that is sacred inside, and not just going for distractions sometimes. And then going to one, sevens really acquire focus by being in their bodies, and not just go for multiple options, like one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm. I think sevens benefit from the movement to five to really get interested in something from the point of view of developing a specialist point of view. Sevens can be too much generalists and not enough going deeper into things. And I think fives are super good at saying, oh, I'm really interested in this. I'm going to learn everything about it. I'm going to drill down very deeply. I'm going to take the whatever time I need to do that and really, really know this subject thoroughly before I go talk about it, right? Sometimes sevens can go start talking about something when they really haven't developed the expertise to do it. And they can actually succeed a bit at it, which only compounds the problem. So I think they can use five in that way and become a specialist, don't just stay a generalist. And then they can use one in many good ways. But I think one is, okay, if you have a grand vision or a bold plan, how creating the discipline to really break it down into steps and really describe and articulate those steps in a way where you can really even come to enjoy the implementation process more than you sometimes do. Sevens like the idea stage much more than the implementation, but sevens are excellent at creating processes and structures for implementations and seeing things in a step by step way that make them more simple to follow a particular path. And I think sevens can benefit from that tendency of ones.
Beautiful. I think we talked about many good resources for growth. and forget about the other points on the Enneagram, the other 4 points. Concentrate on these ones that you have a more direct connection to.
Yes, I sometimes hear people say, oh, we're all 9 types, we have them all in us. And while at a very high level, that might be true because the Enneagram symbol in the circle is a kind of symbol of wholeness. But we're as mere humans who are working to do what we can to become more aware and raise our consciousness. We need to do things in the ways that make a difference. And I think drawing on these 4 connected points in the ways that we're describing, when with the wings, when it's maybe earlier on the path and when you want a more simple stretch, with the airline movements, when you're ready for something more radical, something more challenging. If you can start with these as a way of integrating other types and going with the flow of what life, what the universe is bringing you, I think that can be a more effective way of breaking out of your box and breaking out of your fixated view of your the lens that you tend to be caught in without always realizing that you are.
Good.
So that does it for this episode of the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. Thank you for listening. We hope you will join us next time for the conversation we end up having then, where we talk about all things Enneagram.